Welcome to Fill the Void podcast, where we discuss unhealthy human habits caused by the society of consumption. Hi, Michelle. First of all, thank you for participating in this episode of Fill the Void podcast. Michelle is a highly sensitive people's and empath coach, and she helps empaths heal from toxic relationships and turn their pain into purpose. Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and how you became a trauma-informed certified coach?
Of course, thank you. First of all, it's really lovely to be here. So thank you for having me on this.
Thank you.
How did I get here? So like you said, I coach empaths and highly sensitive people. I help them turn their pain into purpose and heal from toxic relationships. I got to this point because I am a very sensitive person myself, and I'm an empath as well. And I come from a background of growing up in quite a chaotic environment, but also struggling to kind of feel accepted in the environments that I was in as a highly sensitive person, feeling so different from everyone else. And so I soon became the emotional caretaker for everyone. I was the person that everyone needed, and that I was there. You know, if you need me, I'm there. And so I became a big overgiver because I empathized with other people, but also I then started to feel responsible for other people's feelings, and I didn't want other people to feel upset or disappointed. So that led me into adult relationships where I became also the overgiver, right? I was very empathetic. I took it to the extreme where I was attending to other people's needs and not my own. So what that meant is that I completely lost touch of who I was. I didn't know who I was or what I wanted out of life. And that was my big wake-up call, the moment when I realized that I was a puppet and everyone else was controlling the strings. And so that eventually led me to getting into this work, working on myself and overcoming all of these tendencies. At the time, I was caught in a lot of narcissistic relationships, and, you know, from home to romantic relationships to workplaces, I was surrounded by it. And I realized I need to do something about this. And so I worked on myself and eventually started creating safety in my life and safe relationships where I started to feel fulfilled and actually started to experience joy in my life. And that's where I started to go, okay, I need to share this with others. I need to help others who have been in a similar position and who feel so much for everybody, and help them heal so that they can go on to pursuing their purpose of maybe helping others if that's what they choose to do. So here I am now on this mission.
Yeah, what a topic is. I can relate to trying to find validation externally just to feel good. But in reality, we just have to look inside of us. 100%. That's so important.
Yeah, and this is so common, especially for empaths, because so in the work that I do, I have a big focus on codependency, and many empaths, most empaths, in fact, are codependents because of this kind of natural sense of life, enjoying giving to other people, but it takes it to an extreme because of trauma, right? Trauma responses, trying to feel safe by attending to everyone else and seeking that external validation and that love externally when really all they're trying to do is self-soothe. They're trying to soothe themselves of the discomfort and the pain that they're absorbing from other people, which is making them seek this thing.
Exactly. And what exactly does it mean to be a trauma-informed certified coach?
So I personally have, every coach and every person has their own methods, right? What I believe to be especially important in the work I do to help people heal are two things.
Yes.
One is addressing the root cause of what is driving the patterns. So in this instance that I was just giving right now, it was, you know, the codependency tendencies of overgiving, of seeking validation externally, of seeking that love in order to self-soothe, right? Addressing the root cause of this, which requires trauma-informed work. So basically healing the inner child wounds at the core of it all, which is driving these patterns. And the transformative coaching side, which I do in parallel to the trauma-informed work, which I believe to be equally important, right? So the trauma-informed side is us learning how to self-regulate, how to nurture our inner child and heal those deeper wounds. Plus, the coaching side is actually learning how to reparent yourself. So how to start setting boundaries in a way that feels good for me and that feels respectful to other people, and how to communicate so that we don't end up falling into our trauma responses, so that we can actually have the skills that we never learned as children, but learning the skills now so that we can parent ourselves in a healthier way, so that we can have relationships that are healthy and start thriving in those relationships. So it's the practice.
Amazing. So interesting. And these wounds, these traumas, are carried by that inner child because are traumas that we experienced when we were kids and never were able to heal them.
100%. So an example of that, or a very common example of that, right, for an empath, a codependent empath, might be that they were trying to say, well, one of their parents was maybe very unpredictable or was suffering deeply. And so the empath perceived that parent as being someone who was helpless, who needed saving. And the empath, with the heart that they have, they just want to see everyone okay. But then this is where the codependency tendencies start to develop. It's the moment where the empath goes, my parent is suffering, I need to fix them in order to feel safe within myself. So these are the kind of stories that come from childhood, very often wanting to rescue a parent, for example. That go into wanting to rescue your romantic relationships and seeking toxic people, toxic relationships.
Yeah. And being an empath, this is a personality trait that you are born with, or you develop this because of these attachments and relationships and codependencies that happen?
I'm glad you asked that because it's a really common misconception. So empaths are highly sensitive people, and highly sensitive people are born with that trait. So this trait exists in the animal kingdom too. There are hundreds of animal species that have sensitivity as well. You can sometimes see it in pets or young children. Some people just have more of a sensitivity. So there's a lot of research that Dr. Elaine Aron did when she wrote the book, The Highly Sensitive Person. So that explains this trait very well on a neurological level as well, in that it is an innate trait, a trait that we are born with. And it just means that we respond differently to the world. We tend to be more sensitive to the physical things like lights, noises, smells, even our senses in general are magnified, and we respond more deeply on an emotional level. We feel more deeply. And empaths, so that's highly sensitive people, whereas empaths is taking that to an even more extreme level of sensitivity. So they can feel what other people feel and all of that. But where it turns into codependency is where the empath child was suffering and felt that, okay, in order to feel safe, I need to overgive, or I need to rescue someone else. I need to be more attentive to them and their needs and their feelings to fix it so that I can feel okay.
And how does this manifest? Because when you talk, and I was thinking, I feel I'm a sensitive person, for example, but this being a highly sensitive person or an empath, it can manifest always in being this person that ends up in a toxic relationship and being abused in a way, or it can also manifest with another personality that's stronger in reality to cover all that emotion, heaviness. You know what I mean?
That's a good point in that. Yeah, it's true. Some people do cover it up by it's their way of surviving in the world, right?
Yeah.
To carry a mask. And a lot of highly sensitive people do that because they're trying to adapt to the world around them. And it just means that they end up being inauthentic because they don't feel like it's safe to be their true self. They don't feel like they will be accepted.
Exactly.
And also, it's very common for many to enter toxic relationships, especially if they have experienced trauma in the past where they're trying to fix the same problem that they tried fixing as children, right? Trying to fix their parents' feelings or rescue the person that they were never able to rescue and all of that. So they will seek relationships where they have that same challenge and where it's hardest to get that love and validation from.
And yeah, it's like a cycle of constant frustration in trying to save someone that in reality we're never going to save.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 And can you share a personal or professional experience that led you, like a specific experience that led you to develop this strong interest in helping individuals address and heal from trauma?
I think as a sensitive child growing up, I was always interested in other people's behavior, right? I was always very curious. So I feel like it's something I've always had, like this curiosity to want to understand. Sensitive children are naturally very emotionally, I'm not trying to big myself up, but are naturally emotionally intelligent. They're able to see things, understand emotions. And that always made me curious. I always wanted to understand, why are people around me suffering? Why am I responding in this way? You know? And so I always kind of had that interest. It never left me. And like I said at the beginning of this, whenever I did work on myself and eventually get to a point where I was like, wow, I feel like I can live life now, you know, and I feel safe in myself. And I started being able to attract healthier relationships where I felt safe and actually started enjoying life. That's when I thought I need to share that. And I always had this desire to want to enjoy helping people. And I recognized that those tendencies of codependency had to be healed first before I could go in and help others in a way that would benefit them most, because people don't want to be rescued. They want to be heard, and we need to take a detached enough stance from them to be able to fully help them. Otherwise, if I'm in the story with them, I'm living the story with them, and I won't be able to help them in the way that they really deserve. So,
Yeah. And how was your journey to healing? Like, how many years did it take you? Are you still healing? Is that a work that is done our whole lives?
absolutely, absolutely. Like, for as long as we're alive, we will continue to grow, right? And things will, the more we kind of unpack about ourselves, the more comes to the surface. I feel like the big benefit in this work is that it helps us grow our self-awareness. So I am at a stage in my life, it's not at all to say that I don't have challenges in my life. It's just that I know how to address those challenges more confidently. I know how to respond to them so that I don't keep myself in a place of suffering. I know how to overcome challenges a lot more quickly. So it's not to say I never have any, because life throws unexpected things at us, but it's knowing that I will be okay and I can trust that I know how to deal with them. Well, because absolutely, we continue to grow for a lifetime, and that really, really never ends.
And so in this context, as we're talking, and you being highly sensitive, and in the context of trauma-informed coaching, how do you define filling the void? And why is this concept important in your work? Like, how do you relate to this concept of filling the void? Maybe this existential emptiness, and you being highly sensitive. How have you navigated this through life?
I think that's a beautiful metaphor here, especially I think for highly sensitive people, because there is this void that highly sensitive people feel since a very young age, of feeling no one gets me, no one understands me. And I see this in all of my clients, and even as adults, and even people in their their 60s and all of that. It's that feeling of, I don't feel like I ever was understood or heard in my life, because people make assumptions that you're over emotional or oversensitive or overreacting. And so you end up gaslighting yourself with those things and self-shaming yourself. And that creates a void from, within, of feeling like there's something faulty in there. And what empaths tend to not recognize is that they do have the power. If they do take their power back, or that power that they've given away, if they start to take that power back, then they can start to fill that void themselves and recognize that there is a lot of wholeness in there, that it's really not void. There's a lot of wholeness in there, and that they have the power to be able to create the life that they really want and deserve.
And so, of course, the opposite of being an empath is a narcissistic. Why do these opposites attract? In what way?
So, in simplistic terms, empaths love to give and give and give, and especially codependent, right? Codependent empaths love to give and give and give. And narcissists love to take and take and take. And so when you put those two together, then they magnetize, right? And this is why codependent empaths in particular end up drawn towards narcissists, because they are the person who, well, first of all, the narcissist love bombs them. So in other words, they make them feel special. And maybe the empath felt like, finally, I found someone who sees that I am, a good person, who sees that I am special, when the whole world did not recognize that since I was young, right? So it's that inner craving that codependents have of wanting to be loved, wanting validations. And then the narcissistic people need that narcissistic supply, which is someone to control, to manipulate, to be able to, get their needs met. And that's what keeps the cycle going, unfortunately.
Yeah, we humans get into cycles, into so many different cycles, and it's difficult to get out in so many ways. And as we were talking before, trauma can manifest in various ways in people's lives. You help your clients in these two ways that you mentioned before, like the coaching, and then what was the other one?
So the trauma-informed work.
The work.
Which is healing
Yes.
work, yeah, and the coaching, which is the practical part of it, yeah.
Exactly. And in the practical way, like, how do you help your clients identify and address these specific voids or challenges they are facing as a result of their trauma?
So we tend to sort of unpack things, right? So the issue that they might come to me with might be the surface issue, right? So they might have some awareness, but the more we get down into those layers of understanding what is really going on at the depth of it, so what is really driving these patterns, what is really the story behind it all, right? Because it's not just about overgiving and wanting someone that can love me and that I can love, right? These trauma responses all come from a story from the past, and identifying that story from the past, and most importantly, healing those feelings of deep unworthiness, of inner wounds that you're carrying with you very much, in the present, so that we can then move forward from there. Because understanding the story is one thing, but actually healing it and moving forward from it is a whole other thing, which is extremely important if we want to move forward in our lives.
Yeah, exactly. We can just start by being aware, but if we don't start the healing process, it's like we get stuck in the middle.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. We can educate ourselves and read books and all of that, but ultimately that information is great, but that's not what creates change. What creates change is the healing work and the action that we put into things, and the right action, right? Knowing what action to take.
Exactly. And what are some misconceptions about trauma and the healing process? And how do you address this with your clients?
Misconceptions about trauma and the healing process. I think, first of all, a lot of people are afraid of visiting that place. And I can also understand that, because I have heard a lot of stories of people kind of left hanging in that place, feeling like, okay, if I revisit that story from my past, then I'm going to be stuck there and relive that trauma again and again.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big conception of misconception of the healing process and visiting and revisiting trauma. And unfortunately, it is true that this does happen to a lot of people, but that tends to be because they are getting the wrong kind of support. There are some types of therapy or therapists, maybe I should say, that are are not focused on moving you forwards from the trauma. So they help you go back into that place, understand what happened, make you analyze the story of the past, and then what? Okay,
Exactly.
I'm back in that place, and then what? And that is a scary thing, to be left back in that place. We don't want that. And this is why I'm such a huge believer that we need to move forward from there. And this is why I also truly believe in coaching, because coaching was created to help people move forward, right? It's based on positive psychology for that reason. It's to help you move forwards towards achieving your potential and your goals so that you're not stuck in the place in the past. And I also believe in therapy, but I think that there are different types of therapists and different forms of therapy. And it's a very dangerous game to be stuck in that place of trauma.
Yeah. Coaching is more of like providing tools for the person to be able to heal and move forward in that problem completely. That is
Yes.
so important. And how do you adapt your coaching approach to meet the unique needs of each individual and like each different circumstances that each individual is in?
So the work I do is very personalized in terms of the clients that I work with, both one-to-one and in a small group environment, depending on what type of client it is. But it's a very personal approach in terms of understanding what what is getting in the way of them allowing themselves to create freedom in their lives, right? So what is driving those patterns for themselves specifically? Because yes, there tends to be a common ground, right, for many empaths, but not every specific situation is the same. So I do personally guide them towards developing that awareness of what is the story behind their tendencies and how is it that we can start to create that change and create small action steps to change that for them, in a way that doesn't feel too overly scary, but at the same time that will require courage.
And how do you treat a client that, for example, is unable to reconnect or be aware with a trauma or a problem? What resources or tools do you recommend, and how do you manage this type of situation?
But can you repeat the start of that
Oh,
question?
yeah. Like, how do you manage these maybe clients that are unable to like go back and revisit these traumas, or like are lacking a lot of self-awareness to be able to, how do you manage that situation?
I mean, I do a sort of pre-call before enrolling people. So I don't like to say it's an interview process, but at the same time, but it's more it goes both ways, right? It's a two-way interview in the sense that we want to make sure that it feels like a good fit. And part of what I look for in that when I get on these calls is to see whether the person is ready to create change. Because yes, we are to some degree, you know, victims of what happened to us. But we also, if we want to create change, we have to start taking responsibility for the change that is going to occur in our life. And it's not to ever say that what happened to us was ever our fault, but no one else is coming to do the work for us. We need to take that into our own hands and create change for ourselves. And that takes courage and vulnerability, and that's why not everyone is willing to get into this work, because it can be uncomfortable and scary to change patterns that we've been living with for our whole entire lives, right? So I do look out for that. And I have turned some people down in the past. Most I don't turn down, but on the odd occasion I do turn people down if I sense that they're not ready. And it's not to say that they have to know exactly what everything will look like and all of that. That's also my job to guide them through it. But it's to say that, if a person is not ready to confront parts of themselves and is still very much adamant that their way is the right way or the only way, then, it's there needs to be accountability there. And that's what I look for.
Yeah, it's difficult to go into these like dark places of ourselves. It creates a lot of uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give to someone who is currently struggling with trauma and seeking to fill the void in their life?
My advice is to turn inwards, because so many people go into this place of either looking for the answers outside of themselves through other people. So be attentive to what resources you are selecting, because a lot of people will have different viewpoints. And recognize that you are not going to be able to fix your internal problems through trying to fix things outside of yourself. Your healing starts from within, from self-reflection, from looking at your own patterns, not at blaming others or not at thinking, oh, hope is lost because I'm an empath. And, it's that kind of, I don't always like to use it, but it's the victim mindset, right? Yes, we are victims,
Yeah.
but a victim mindset is different to being a victim, right? We can be a victim and not be in a victim mindset. So it's important to acknowledge what happened to us and that it's not okay. And we do need to release the shame around it. But getting out of that victim mindset means I am going to start taking that power back now and actually look at what patterns I have learned over the years that are not serving me because of my unfortunate past experiences, that actually need to be rectified so that I can grow and make myself start living a better life for myself, because only you have the power to create that change.
Yeah, because like the easy way is basically to blame something from the external instead of looking to ourselves and taking charge. That's what like hurts. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so my last question for you is, how do you see the future of trauma coaching evolving, and what role do you hope to play in that evolution regarding like where the world is going, technology? What's your vision?
I think trauma-informed coaching is a growing industry, and I think it's great because people are starting to realize that trying to rationalize our way out of something is not the solution, that the solution is actually deeper than that. It's addressing the root of the trauma and learning how to regulate your nervous system and how to learn how to self-soothe and nurture your inner child, right? So it's deeper than that. So I think it's great that the industry is being more educated now in that sense. And I think so many people are going to benefit more and more from that, because I became a coach because I so powerfully believe in the power of coaching. And I think therapy is great, but coaching offers something different. Yeah, which is helping you actually achieve your full potential and
Yeah.
step into the life that you deserve.
Yeah. And I also think that like where the world is going regarding everything, like how we eat the food, the processed foods, everything, the capitalism, how it makes us just consume and consume. We humans find ourselves in this position of we are breaking ourselves to fit into this world. So all these symptoms arise. And this is where you coaches and me, coach to be, come into place, and people are like starting to express their emotions more, and problems are starting to become more normal, because in the past it wasn't this way.
I totally agree with that. And I think that the world still lacks a lot of awareness in this. A lot of people get caught in this, for example, the corporate game, right? And there's a lot of egos, unfortunately, in those types of environments, and a lot of emphasis on you need to be harder and tougher and numb to your feelings if you want to be successful. And I think there's a lot wrong with that, of course. Like I think that is a huge way of trying to self-protect. A lot of people try and self-protect in that way, and then it gets passed down to the employees and to the generations beyond. And that's how generational trauma is essentially created, right? It's passing down the responses.
Yeah. And even us being women, it's even more difficult. And this is a question for you, but like women are mostly more like, you find more women being empaths than men? Or
no, it's 50-50. Yeah. It's all genders, really. The sensitivity is across all genders. Well, I mean, in some ways, I do see men struggling with it more because of toxic masculinity out there in the world. So men do tend to suppress it more, and that's why you might not see it as much. It's like they might have more of a mask that they carry to try and cover it up, because that's the only way they learned how to survive, right?
Yeah, exactly. So thank you, Michelle. This was an incredible conversation. Thank you for shining light in the darkness, because it's good. We all need to look into these places. Thanks again. And it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.